Hi guys, you could agree with me that date objects has been breaking a lot of developers' hearts over the years. We have something better. Working with time zones has been confusing, and working with the date objects in JavaScript has been a nightmare for developers all through these years. So we have something better. Let me introduce you to Temporal, right, which is just the future of date and time in JavaScript. As you can see on the MDN documentation, it says temporal object, right, enables date and time management in various scenarios. So this is meant to be a replacement for the date object. So you need to understand that temporal is not a constructor. So you won't be able to access it through the new keyword, and it says all the properties and the methods of temporal are static, right? It exposes over 200 utility methods via several classes, so it could appear very complex, but it's something that you have to go into and also understand what is happening behind the scene. Okay, instead of one overload date objects trying to do everything badly, temporal gives us multi-purpose build types to do one thing very well. And most importantly, we need to understand that it handles time zones correctly, which you know is a hell working with the date objects. Temporal also supports nanosecond and precisions. The API is clean and predictable. All right, like we said, this is meant to be a modern replacement for the old date objects. So I'll leave a link to the documentation for whoever is interested. There's a lot of things going on here about the API and the structure, right? We are just gonna keep this very basics. What we can see here is CodePen open up, right, and we just have some JavaScript running over here. This is the new date object. This is the date object from JavaScript, how we handle dates in JavaScript before now, and we're mutating this particular object, and we're logging into our console, and we can actually see the dates over here. This basically mutates the objects, our new date objects, and worst, it also makes the parsing inconsistent, right? So we can't even know if this date is UTC or it's local time, or it just depends. So getting this kind of response, right, from our date objects we've been using over the years, we can see that there's no real-time zone support. We can't know what zone the particular date for this user is. Day saving time bugs can also derive from like using your date object. Talk about stuff like precision limited to like milliseconds. So this is where temporal basically fixes everything. Okay, like we said, temporal isn't just one class, right? So it's a collection of specialized types which we can use. So let's just look at some examples. So we can take out this real quick and just add some new variables. We can say now could be temporal, right? So it's already available in some browsers, and I think support will be added more browsers in the coming weeks and months, right? So if you say now, basically temporal.now.instance should just give us, let's try to log now. Let's see what is now. Now you can see this is basically giving us the representation of an exact point in time globally, right? We have access to nanosecond precisions, right? So this is just one of the method, right, we could use with temporal. So let's look at another example. So we can say, so this is just one way of using the temporal variable. So we say temporal now dot instance, and we can just see that this is all being run in the browser. We don't have any extra library installed. We have access to the nanosecond precision. This kind of response basically is something we could use for like maybe database storages or event tracking, to get a precise time and date, right? Or we could use such response, right, for logging. If we look at other available types in temporal, right, so we can say temporal instead of instance, right, we have a way to represent date and time plus time zone all by default. So we could have access to something like zone, I think the right name is zone time date ISO, right? These are all on documentation, all right? So we can have access to all this on the documentation. We can see just with just this line, we have access to the date, we have time zone, right? So like documentation already said, temporal is trying to replace the date objects, try to be built on already existing system, and to extend it to a way that JavaScript isn't hell anymore to developers, right, when they are working with dates in their JavaScript applications. So looking at this now, we already have access to the time, we have access to the date, we have access to the time zone. Right? Time zone, we have access to the time zone with the UTC offset We have access to the calendar system. So this kind of date response or this kind of object is something that could be used for your UI displays, for your scheduling application. We could use it for like international apps that are used across like different time zones. So just with temporal now zone date time ISO, we have access to this automatically. There are more APIs or there are more types that are available in temporal, which are all in the documentation. We could check. We have the plain date, we have the plain time, we have the plain date time. We also have stuff for like arithmetic and durations. Yeah. So going back to the documentation, a lot of things are happening here. I just want to just talk about this, touch it real quick because it looked like something that's very, very interesting. I have worked with dates in a lot of applications, and I know how crazy it gets when you start having to work on an international app or a time that or an application that is being used in different time zones. So I think JavaScript has finally fixed dates. Temporal basically is a very clean API. It's powerful. It's built for modern apps. If you ever thought to date, I feel like this is your upgrade, right? It makes more sense to start experimenting with it now while it's in early stage, because this is definitely going to be the future of like date time in JavaScript. Okay, and it's also worth mentioning that this is basically not supported in all browsers, but I think major browsers are supported. As you can see, the browser compatibility draft here supported in some browsers. I think over the next month, over the next coming weeks and year, we should have more support for like Opera and Node.js and other system. I think Bond system 2 doesn't even support it yet. So this is documentation. It's worth checking out. It's worth reading the API structure, why they did what they did. So I just thought about making this video, and hopefully this spark an interest to someone to check out the documentation, to check out this, because definitely this is going to be the new way of writing dates in JavaScript in the coming future. Bye for now, and I'll see you in the next video.